Building apps and basic software has become so accessible that anyone with decent technical curiosity can do it. This begs the question, then why buy simple software and deal with its engineering limitations if it's not doing exactly what you need and only what you need? If you can just, do it yourself in an afternoon. Modern websites are a great example of this. WordPress web page builders are very popular in the millions of websites that use them because they're supposed to be accessible to the average webmaster. But that's not really how it works out in practice. What page builders really do is they add a lot of weight and they drag down site speeds. But for all the problems that they introduce, they don't really make editing web pages that much easier. And AI coding tools, and specifically OpenAI's Codex, makes coding entire projects yourself a realistic option. So you don't need a web page builder if you can just write the code yourself. Codex can tackle significant tasks agentically, as in all on its own, and will typically return from a long time working on its own with a functioning result. In this video, I'll show you how I used Codex to generate a gallery widget for WordPress with a nice looking front end and an easy to use backend for WordPress admin in just a few hours one afternoon. And it's not a prototype. It's a functioning plugin that I'm using on several sites. And it's fast. The site's fast in general because there's no big plugin, there's no dependencies, and it just takes a relatively small amount of code, just what's absolutely necessary. See, now I'm building websites by using GPT-5 or Codex to build out the HTML and the CSS, and then also using Codex to translate that into a WordPress theme. And that goes kind of contrary to all of the logic that we've had over the last 5 to 10 years about how you should do WordPress and what the best practices are. We all want fast sites, but we've got them loaded down with all of these plugins. And the general idea is good. It's based on the concept of modularity, that we can have some kind of like reusable code to use between websites. But because these have become businesses and they have a need to grow and to make more revenue, they just keep packing more and more features into them, and they become bloated and unwieldy. And then you install them for one simple thing and you have this massive weight that you have to load either on every page or frequently enough. So what I'm doing now is kind of stripping all of that away, just building the exact site that I need with as few dependencies as possible, and then using AI to do all that work and to shape it into a WordPress theme. And rather than needing to have the kind of detailed drag and drop editing tools that come with WordPress page builders, it's just a simple enough thing for me to rig the design that I want with a couple of settings pages where I can swap out the hero images and change text in the pages in a few places that are custom to my design. But I don't need a whole page builder to do that, and I definitely don't need the weight and the load time that's associated with them. So now my sites are just very thin and lightning fast, and I've taken this next step to make them modular and reusable by building them into plugins. And when I say building them, the whole point of this is I don't mean that I'm actually coding anything. I mean that I'm using Codex and GPT-5 to do this building. So that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to show you in this video. So the first step is to get GPT-5 running as an agent in Cursor to set up Docker and install WordPress and MySQL, and generally to configure a runtime environment for local development and testing of WordPress plugins, right? That's what I'm trying to accomplish. So I prompted GPT-5 inside of Cursor for this, and a few minutes later, we had a Docker container and a WordPress installation successfully configured under my home directory, which, pro tip, always install your Docker-related projects on your home directory, as it will save you a lot of hassles and so forth with permissions and other settings later on. On an Apple machine, just go to /users/ your username, your name usually, where your applications folder and your photos folder and so forth are, and then create your repo there, and you will save yourself a lot of trouble with managing Docker. Docker is simply a container for your development environment so that you can run multiple projects at the same time, to start and stop them easily, to delete them, remove them, and all the various files easily. And you can install all of this pretty easily from the command line. And if you're using an agent, it will just do all of this for you. So ask your agent to set up Docker, and then once it's started and your WordPress environment is running, and you can go to localhost and pull up a WordPress page or something like that so that you know it's working, you're ready to begin building out your project. From inside the same project folder, you can now load Codex on the left side of Cursor by going to the same menu that you use for File Explorer and Git and so forth, and then click the three little dots on the right side of that menu at the top, and then scroll to the bottom of that menu, and you'll see after Codex has been installed that that's where it shows up. To install Codex, just go to the extensions page and search for Codex, and then click the install button. This workflow uses Codex inside of Cursor for planning and executing the bigger builds, because Codex is great at planning and in managing multi-step longer tasks, and GPT-5 within Cursor's agent on the right side of the screen for admin tasks and small tweaks and things like that, because it is a little bit faster. When crafting a prompt for a new build, you have some options, especially when you're doing so within an IDE like Cursor, because its harness manages a lot of your typical housekeeping, and so you can approach it in a variety of different ways and just kind of assume that it's going to understand what you're talking about. First, you can try and one-shot your project with a very detailed project spec, and this works very well with Codex and will save you a lot of time in the debugging and tweaking phase, but you don't always know all of that information at the beginning, and maybe you're non-technical, right? So second, you can ask for a plan with a lot of non-technical requirements-led instructions. For example, it must do this, it must not do that, it must have these buttons, and when you click them, these sorts of things will happen, right? It's that kind of sets of instructions that you'll need for everything in your app, every little detail, right? And lastly, you can also have a conversation with the agent or with ChatGPT in a separate window and build a project requirements doc, a PRD, as you go. And this works really well when you're non-technical and also not 100% clear on what it is that you're building yet. Once you've decided your approach, you need to write out your prompt. And in my case, what I chose to do was something kind of between the first and the second options. I have a little bit of technical understanding of what I'm trying to accomplish and how I want to do it, but this is a quickie MVP, and I didn't want to spend all of those hours it takes to sketch out every last detail, so I asked the AI for a recommendation, and then we're going to use that. When it comes to actually writing out your prompt, it's important to do this in very clear steps, and if it's a larger project, you probably want to add more structure to the prompt. But either way, pro tip, rather than prompting with all of your rules for how you want your development to go, how you want your files to be treated, and what you want the agent to be able to do, rather than putting all of that into your prompt, put it in an agents.MD file and then direct the agent to refer to that as it's planning and building. So you can just keep referring back to it. You can also work with the agent or ChatGPT to define your agents.md file rules separately and improve upon them as you go. And this is very useful because you're going to reuse these rules between projects, at least in part. So what you're left with are instructions that describe the heart of what you want to build in technical docs or visual descriptions and diagrams, or both, ideally. In this case, I'm building a WordPress plugin for adding gallery sections to web pages. I've never really found a gallery plugin that I like. They're all over-engineered and they cause the site to be slow. But I want to be able to add and manage galleries inside of WordPress, like using the WordPress media library. So rather than just building an HTML gallery that's static, that's not good enough for me. What I want in the end is just to build my own custom solution. So my initial prompt describes every view, every screen, every button click, hover effect, everything that I want to see in the final result. It describes the database layer, how the plugin integrates with various WordPress features, and how the plugin settings will be managed in the WordPress admin tool. It defines shortcodes and code snippets for using the gallery in the site's pages and templates. It includes details for extending or overriding the design on different galleries with custom CSS. It includes effectively every aspect of its function, appearance, and various requirements or guardrails. Everything is described in the prompt. After spending a good while on this prompt, I submitted it, and I got back a plan from the agent based on the instructions that I gave it. And if you do this right, you'll have very few revisions. It'll just kind of mirror what you said back to you. If it's way off, you should consider just starting over and optimizing, restructuring your prompt a little bit more thoroughly, and then trying again. In the end, just review the plan very carefully. Most problems are more easily fixed prior to building than afterwards. But if all the details feel solid and you're sure the AI understands exactly what you want, then give it approval to build in a new branch. Codex will then run autonomously, working away until all of its to-dos are complete. You then begin the cycle of feeding feedback and screenshots into the agent, and you can use Codex or GPT-5 for this part of the process, the tweaking phase, until all of the issues have been resolved and the final product is exactly what you want. In my case, you can see that there were multiple iterations. It almost got it right at the beginning, but the display was a little cramped and some of the images weren't hovering correctly once we applied captions to them. So there were a few details that needed to be ironed out, and I spent a couple of hours pasting screenshots and small bits of error messages or descriptions of what it was or wasn't doing into Codex, and then allowing it to go away for a few minutes and solve those problems. But by the evening, I had a working plugin, a slick design, and a very easy to use and intuitive WP admin tool for maintaining the gallery. This is exactly what I wanted. It's very specifically exactly what I wanted from it. And I was able to knock it out in an afternoon, thanks to Codex effectively one-shotting a bunch of my requests and getting it 99.9% correct the first time. This is truly incredible now. I've solved this problem for all my future sites, and if I want to tweak the design or add some new features or something to the admin page or whatever, then I don't have to submit a trouble ticket to some company that I've already paid to have the solution. I can just jump in there and fix it myself. And by myself, I obviously mean with the help of Codex, who makes all of this possible and is my newest full-time hire.